Hi, this is Subpixel, and I'm here to dispel a myth, that being that Resolume UI displayed on a USB connected display is a bad idea. I have a Hewlett-Packard Omen laptop with a NVIDIA RTX 2070 GPU, and looking here at the NVIDIA control panel, you can see that I've only got, in setup multiple displays, that there's only one display that's connected to the GPU. Let's close this for the moment because it's not really helping us any. If we have a look at the settings system display, you can see I've got two displays, 1 and 2. 1 is the internal laptop display and 2 is this 24-inch HP. And if we have a look in here, we'll see that it's connected at 1920 by 1080. And if we look at the advanced settings, we see that it's 1920 by 1080 at 60 Hertz. Sorry about the wire. And the active signal mode is 1920 by 1080 at 60 Hertz. And we can actually confirm on here the monitor itself, and we can see it's 1920 by 1080 at 60 Hertz. So at the moment I have a Resolume composition where I'm just showing my title card here, and it's actually connected through this USB 3 Lenovo, and it's actually a DVI adapter, but DVI and HDMI, as many of you know, are electrically equivalent except for audio, so that's what's running the external monitor. If we have a look closely here, if my camera will show you, this here is showing that the FPS is currently around 120 FPS. Note that my internal monitor has a 144 Hertz refresh rate, and if we go and look at the task manager for the GPU, we'll see that GPU is currently on 17%. If I actually just go and kill the title card, we'll just have a look to see what the impact there is. And we see that the GPU usage has gone, well, it did go down briefly, but Resolume is still doing stuff even when there's nothing really there. I'll just close the external monitor, see if that made any difference. Okay, so I've disabled the external output in Resolume, and we can see that the GPU usage for 3D has gone down to less than 10%. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to crank up my composition. Let's have a look at what the composition is. So I've got my fairly complex effect that I just demonstrated the other day. We can see that my GPU usage is cranked up to 55 to 60%. And at the moment, I don't have any output. Let's run the output onto screen 1. So we can see it's running full screen here. And if I bring my UI back to the front, I can see that my frame rate, if I can get some focus on this, is currently around 85 to 90 frames per second, which is pretty nice. And if we check the task manager again, we see that the GPU usage is still around that 55% mark. So I can run this also on the external monitor, which we can double check is still running at 1920 by 1080 at 60 Hertz as far as the monitor signal is concerned. The frame rate, according to Resolume, the rendering rate is still around 80 frames per second. And if we look in the task manager, we still see it's around 53% on the GPU. So the rendering is done on the GPU, and then it's sent out via USB to the thing, and I guess it's sampling on the USB at 60 frames per second out of the 80 or so that are actually being rendered. Now, something that people believe is a terribly bad idea is to put the UI onto the second screen. So I'm just going to do that against all advice and see what happens. So the GPU usage hasn't changed. And if we look over here, we'll just see, I'll just close the output altogether, and we see that the frame rate displayed on the external monitor is in the 80s frames per second, so it's 86 frames per second. And I can enable the output on screen 1, currently saying around 80 frames per second. On screen 2 again, and it's still just under 80 frames per second, or just over 80 frames per second. And in fact, I can also run advanced output. So here we've got the advanced output window is on the laptop, and the actual output is on the external display. I can still bring the UI, the main UI for Resolume, back into the foreground on the external display with advanced output still available. And in fact, I can also bring the advanced output window over here. So Daniel's suggestion that if you run the external display on if you run the advanced output window, or if you start running advanced output on an external display, you won't be able to see the advanced output controls anymore, is incorrect. You can show it, and you can still manipulate it however you like. And again, also, we can have the UI and indeed the actual output on an external display, which is not connected directly to the GPU. As I said, we've gone through this USB 3 cable, and still rendering on the GPU. In this case, I don't believe my laptop even has an onboard graphics. It only has the GPU. So we're still running at more than the refresh rate of the monitor in terms of rendering speed, well, frames per second rendered. So I'll just bring my title card again and say that yes, indeed, it is a myth that the USB connected, it is a myth that Resolume UI on a USB connected display is a bad idea. Thank you very much.